Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the BFG Podcast. Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with former Rugby League commentator and analyst and host of Guy Speed on Sky Television, Stephen McIvor. Welcome to the show, Stephen.
Hey, buddy. Thanks for having me on the BFG podcast.
As you know, that's my initial, so that was an easy name to come up with when I started the show.
I actually like it. I think it's really cool. I was trying to think what it was, but now you've told me you've broken the illusion.
So, in your early career, you did a lot of interesting things. You did the Fight for Life. You did the TV3. You've been through the merger with Prime TV and Sky TV. You were in the partnership with the Prime. So what are all those different eras with the partnerships and been working at Sky for so many years? How's that been for you?
Wow, that was a deep and meaningful one, wasn't it? Well, let's take it back. I mean, this year will be probably my 31st year at Sky, right? So, and when we began, right back in the beginning, we were the underdog, right? We were the little TV station that could shout and sing and do everything because we didn't have much. We only had rugby league, and then we had ESPN, which was a bit of a groundbreaker because that gave us basketball and NFL and things like that. And I think those early days were probably more fun because you were the guy that they didn't want around. But sadly, at that point, as new as we weren't making any money. So that's when we had to go out there and buy quite smartly, even though it was considered a crazy notion, buy rugby. Now I was doing everything at the time, so I started doing rugby as well. But while I was doing rugby league, and I think those times when everybody's looking, you go, oh my gosh, you've got this, and then suddenly you get a little bit more, and you get a little bit more, and then you start doing all sorts of things. So the variety of doing things for me was crazy. The Prime thing was really nothing. It didn't affect me at all because I wasn't really involved in that respect. But it's funny, Blake, that you mentioned the Fight for Life because I did 3 of them, crazily enough, and it's back again this July. It's coming back this July. So I think I'm going to be involved, not fighting, because I'm not allowed to fight anymore after the last one. But that was Fight for Life. I mean, that was nuts. You put yourself in a position, you train really hard. I remember my first trainer for the 2 fights was a guy at work. He was an amateur, was an amateur boxer, right? He'd had about 91 amateur fights, right? Yeah. But he was dealing with me. So you're not dealing with a real box. You're dealing with a dodo that had never fought before. And I used to be training in the where the trucks used to come in and drop off the Dakotas, and so there's no real gym to train it properly until we got a bit more serious down the line. So those first 2, where I got the crap beaten out of me, were tough but fun, right? They were a great challenge to do something, to push yourself against something which was as scary as anything, mate. Absolutely scary. The worst part, probably the worst part, is walking into the ring, particularly the first time, because you're going, why am I doing this? What have I done? And so you go, okay, away we go. So that's what I did. And then I did the 3rd one, and I changed trainers to Monty, beat them, and didn't lose, drew, but dropped the guy, dropped him on his bum with a big Irish right hand. So, look, the early days were fun. Things are changing. People are getting their content a different way. And so, not as busy, but still having fun doing Sky Speed with Murph.
So, what is it like knowing that the likes of you and Andrew Mulligan, who's also a semi-regular on this program, are the 2 main goats that are left, and all of the rest have been taken over by the likes of Kirsty Thanaway and maybe Jeff Wilson as well as another one of them. He's been on the show as well. Taken over by Kirsty and all the new blood.
you've got to move forward, right? You have to move forward, and you have to. It's a bit like you've got to make sure that the next generation's ready, whether they're ready or not, is up to anyone else. And that's fine. That's that. You move on with those things, and you work on different projects. But the growing a station, we continue to grow. If you don't evolve, then you start looking the same, right? So you've got to evolve as a brand. And we're not making a lot of television. There is a lot of television going on with sport, but we're not making a lot. So it's easier to bring individuals in at that point and show them the ropes.
And when you started doing the 40-20 back in the early 2000s, now I was born in 98, so
Yep.
a lot of the stuff I've gone back and rewind over the first lockdown and over our continuing lockdown. Now, what was it like doing the 40-20 and the Toyota Carve, and then going on to doing Sky Speed?
Oh man, you bring back all the good memories. You bring it all. 40-20 was that was one of my faves, because particularly on a Warriors away game. So we'd do game day, we'd do the game, the result would happen. Then I'd have to hop back in the car, and along with Chuck, Darren Halligan, we have to go back to the studio to do it. And then so we'd have to race back, and we'd have about 2 hours, but traffic and things like that. So normally you got back within, even though it was about 10 minutes from work, you sort of got back with about an hour to spare, so redo your makeup, rehearse, look at the thing, and away you go. But that was fun, because working with really cool people, Chuck and those guys, and Justin Morgan in the later times. Actually, no, I don't think Morgs ever did 40-20, but 40-20 was good because we tried to make it a little bit more, just entertaining, fun. I mean, you remember it, which is great, right? So how much fun we had, but at the same time we were entertaining, and we were informing and telling you guys exactly what went down, what to look forward to, but not taking ourselves too seriously. As soon as you take yourself too seriously, there's no point. This is a business of entertainment. If you're not entertaining, you're not doing your job, and that's what I think. So yeah, that was a shame when that went, because that was one of my faves. Because it pretty much wrapped up the weekend. That was before we had Monday Night Football, I think. And and we could just laugh a lot. And you've got to be able to laugh a lot. So I do a lot of laughing on Sky Speed with Murph. This is our 9th year, and hopefully no last. And we're just rocking along and just learning all the time, seeing new cool stuff, and having fun.
Because I started watching sport more regularly in 2011 when I was 12. So 10 years ago, or nearly 12 years ago now.
It seems like yesterday when you say that, 2011, doesn't it? Oh, 10 years ago, 12 years ago.
No, 11. Sorry, I lost count. Yeah. So my first big memory was that grand final with the Warriors in 2011.
The man. That was the only year I ever called rugby league. And what a year I had, because I got to call a grand final, and we should have won it, but we didn't, because they never penalised. Who was it? Was it one of the Trebojevic brothers? Was he playing then? Was it just before halftime when they took him out? Remember that?
That was long before Trebojevic,
Oh, was it? Oh my gosh, who was it? Oh, I know. It was the
Jamie.
other. It was the other set of brothers. Who was Snake's brother?
Glenn Stewart.
Thank you. It was Glenn Stewart who took him out. Remember, just before halftime, took him out. We're all going, hang on a minute, where's the penalty? And that broke their back a little bit just on halftime. Oh, I was filthy, absolutely filthy.
But people watching when this video goes up, don't worry, Stephen just woke up when we started recording the video.
Come on, give me a break. It's a long time ago. I don't have a ridiculously strong
No,
memory.
I don't mean that. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I know. But that was cool. I mean, if you remember that day, we had all three teams in grand finals. It was one of those crazy days because we had the Toyota Cup team and then we had the New South Wales Cup team. New South Wales team Cup were first on ground, should have won. Someone made an awful error near the end of the game and lost. Toyota Cup team won with, I think, a penalty, and we got beaten up in the grand final. And that was just an amazing day, an amazing day. And so I still remember calling the game, which I heard back the other day, pretty average to be fair, my call. But I remember then whipping down from the commentary position and then having to do the fronting. And it was, funny enough, I think it was, oh gosh, who was the forward? Who was the edge forward? I can't remember his name now. We were just talking about Manly at that time. And he just walked past us and smiled and then walked in front of the camera and kept going, thinking, well, I want a grand final. I can do what I want. And it was actually really funny. So, yeah, 2011 was an amazing year. And no one,
What?
and they came from sixth. If you think about it, I think they came from sixth
Yeah,
position,
yeah.
finishing sixth. And so that was even better. The fact that we couldn't continue on and keep Ivan Cleary, well, that's another story. That's another story we all keep talking about.
What was it intimidating having to sit in the same media row as the likes of Warren Smith and Channel 9, so Phil Gould and Ray Warren? Did you feel like out of place?
That's a really good question. Well, I think you always do when you're only doing it in your first, and as it turns out, your last year. Yeah, that was it. I wasn't intimidated. I was actually more excited to be around them. I mean, Warren Smith's a really good friend of mine, and he's really a really charitable guy. And I think a couple of times he rang me and said, "Hey, look, just help me out." The Channel 9 guys live in their own world. They lived in their own, and they still live in their own world. They're lovely guys out of it, but some of them just, we're the Channel 9 guys to keep out of our way, sort of thing. Ray though would never be like that. He was lovely, and I sort of listened to how Ray Warren commentated games, and for him it's about rhythm, the rhythm of calling a game, and then suddenly he bangs up when a moment is happening and someone's taken off or scoring a try. And he was able to keep this really nice flow going, but also keep you excited all the way through. Plus, he had a beautiful voice. And I think you've got to remember that, the good commentators have beautiful voices.
And bless him, as of this recording, he's still going.
Man, he's still going, knocking 80, I think, too. I don't think he's doing that much more, though, but he's still going. I think he's just getting old, right?
He's knocking 90, actually, I think.
No,
80,
he's not. 80, I think.
85,
80. Oh, my
85 or 90.
Oh my gosh! Well, that'll be a sad day when he's no longer calling. It'll be a sad day because he set the standard, and I think he set the standard too for a lot of other sports commentators in Australasia. And I think that if you're going to leave a legacy, that's a pretty cool legacy.
Now you've had sorry, I missed your question, so I will backtrack and then I'll start that next statement. So the NRL, for various reasons, decided to take away the Toyota Cup, what would later become the Holden Cup, because of various reasons to do with concerns around welfare and mental health, etc., etc. Do you think that was, looking back, a regretful decision, and would you like to see it return in some capacity one day?
That's a really interesting question. I actually thought it was a really strong pathway for young men playing rugby league. There was a condition in that contract that young men, and it was doing more than just teaching them how to play rugby league. It was also teaching them how to be good young men, because you weren't allowed to play if you didn't have an apprenticeship or you were working at a career, in the sense that you could make it work. So an apprenticeship, or you were studying or doing something. So that was one of the key elements of the Toyota Cup, was to make sure that young men, because there was, they were having issues about, and we still see it today, of people leaving the game, having no money, or falling on hard times, or just just not great endings. The cost of it was probably quite restrictive. You're having to carry another 30 odd players. They were on part-time contracts, so they weren't huge contracts. Also, it wasn't necessarily costing them salary-wise, but it was costing them when they had to travel as well. So those costs were inflicting on bottom lines of the clubs. I think it should be back in some form. I think it was a great idea. And and I know, some of the players that we've seen through Warriors came through the Toyota/Holden Cup, and it was some of the most exciting footy going around. The only thing you'd change a little bit was maybe, slow it down a bit so they could learn how to defend, because there wasn't a lot of defence going on. But when you saw the defence, you saw where young kids were becoming young men to learn how to play the game. So to answer your question, I'd love to sit back.
And then you had, without the Toyota/Holden Cup, we would, and it's crazy to think that first round of graduates are now retiring. Like, they're just crazy.
Oh, well, I think Sean Johnson came through to use a present example, Sean Johnson came through the Toyota Cup, and he's now the oldest in the current Warriors team. How does that make you feel?
Yeah. So, so without the Toyota/Holden Cup, we would never got to see the likes of Anthony Milford, Nick Kotrick, the Trebojevic brothers.
Yep, exactly.
So,
so you're answering the question for yourself. To be fair, it did produce great rugby league players, and they should look at how they get back into it, because it's, again, and we live in this age of what we're doing now. We're making content, right? It's more content. It's just probably too expensive.
Because it's like, the thing that bothers me is it's like, they say, it's too risky because of mental health rates and etc. etc. But then they go and have a SG ball version. So what's the difference? That's what really bothers me.
Well, you know what? I can't answer that question. I don't know. The only losers in this game of the Toyota Cup could primarily be the Warriors, because where we're based. Because, although I think they have an SG, do they have an SG ball team now? Do they have an SG ball team up in Redcliffe? I'm not sure. You probably know more.
They did have some sort of SG ball / New South Wales one a couple of years ago that played out in North Harbour for a while.
Yeah. So yeah, but there you go. We talk about evolvement. You talk about television evolvement. Things evolve. I mean, the most important thing is they're in the comp and we're in the comp. I think the sad thing is we don't have an NRLW team. I see that's expanding to 10. I think come 2024 they announce it. 24. So hopefully the Warriors will put an NRLW team in again.
Do you eventually see it becoming similar to the going way off track here, but similar to the A-League Women's or Super W, where meaning Super Rugby, where eventually all the NRL teams have a women's team and we have a full slate of women's competition and a male counterpart version?
Well, you'd hope so. But again, the only thing that's going to limit it is the availability of talent and the cost to do it. I mean, it's easy to do it on your home because you just have a curtain raiser. You have your curtain raisers. It's obvious, right? There's nothing to say one day they could be the main games on separate weekends and home games or whatever. But yeah, I think it's possible, but it's a lot of money. And, money makes the world go round, and they don't want to keep, So I'm as intrigued and quite excited to see they're going to expand it. So there is a desire. Women's sport, particularly women's oval ball sport, is exploding. So I think it's great.
And speaking of women's sport, like I was talking to someone about this the other day. In Australia, some of the ticket sales are more popular than the men, but just crazy.
Sorry, I just stuffed a big chocolate chip cookie in my mouth. Yeah, and that simply says one thing, Blake. that people want to see it. If that's not a recommendation to expand the competition, then why not?
And yeah, so like, I really do hope we get a variation of the Holden Cup that one day. Anyway, so you got to work with a whole lot of hosts of people over the years. We had Lavina Good, and I hope I got that name right.
No, she's one of my faves. Loves her rugby league, huge Parramatta fan, and a real professional. And she's one of my faves. Lovely lady.
A very, very underrated commentator who is a crying shame we don't see on TV very much.
Yeah.
Even growing up, I always thought, even as a little 13-year-old boy, I already knew she had enough knowledge to know how underrated she was.
I know Lavina, and I've spoken to Lavina. She'd love to be back doing the footy, but as I said to you earlier, times move on.
But it was great to hear her back at the Commonwealth Games a few years ago.
Well, she was actually on the Winter Olympics as well. She was over in Beijing, and I heard this voice giving out Zoe Zadowski's sentence at the medal ceremony. This voice, commentating the medal ceremony for Zoe Zadowski's sentence. I went, hang on a minute. Hang on, I know that voice. So I hopped on WhatsApp, and sure enough, it was her.
Yeah. And then you had, in the very early days of 2020, you had another gentleman on the team with you, and it wasn't Daryl, it was another guy with glasses, and you probably can't remember his name either, and his name escapes me.
Who?
And I don't know the name, but he had the glasses and...
Robo.
Is that him? Yeah.
Well, who I used to host all the rugby league with?
The 40-20, before Daryl Halligan took it with you.
Oh,
there was another guy.
Was it Robo? Did Robo do 40-20 with me? Peter Roparty?
Yeah. I think it was, yeah.
Yeah, well, we were the
guy had... I was looking back at some of the footage getting ready for this interview, and the guy had like glasses and short hair.
Samoan?
Yeah.
Yeah, Peter. That's Robo. Yeah. He ended up being my best man. So, he was, we came from the famous Ropati family, Tio Ropati and the likes. And he was fun. We had a long, strong association because he too loved the game, but also loved having fun. Right. And that's where I think some people forget about it. And nowadays they don't realize that they're there to entertain, not to just try and tell us what we would like to know, but that we're there so your afternoon can be a whole heap of fun.
Now, you also started doing a lot of the Olympic type coverage and the bigger events. How has that been fun? And also transitioning into radio, looks like that's been fun as well.
I sort of started in radio. You probably didn't know that. I actually started in radio straight out of school at 17. So there was never a transition. I was just yes, I love radio. I still love radio. So if there's any chance I get to do some radio, I'll do some radio, which is why I'm doing with Greg Murphy, a radio show every Thursday night called Race Control on SENZ, a bit like a radio version of Sky Speed. So that's a heap of fun. The Olympics were amazing. My first trip was the Vancouver Winter Olympics. Got to call the opening and closing ceremony. Spent a month in Whistler. That was terrible.
Too cold?
Really bloody cold. Yeah. So I had all the gear and still got all the gear actually. Still got the warm jackets and the like. Only because I was the one organising the gear anyway, so I did the deal. So I still got all good stuff. But Vancouver was amazing. Gave me an understanding on a global scale of what it was like to deal with all the sports. Hard work because we were only sort of sending out a limited amount of stuff because that's what we were able to do. The big one for me, and then I did Com Games in Delhi in 2010, called the opening and closing ceremonies, and I love India. India is just amazing. They're amazing people. The the hardest thing to deal with is the gaps between the haves and the have-nots. You see pretty clearly, and it's a real eye-opener. So that was more about, on a personal level, quite a real journey of learning, about who has what and who doesn't. But you discover pretty quickly, and it sounds a bit weird to say it, but those that don't have are still happy. They're still smiling. Maybe that was just from where I was standing. The big one for me was, and this is going to an event, right, was the London Olympics. And the Lavina and I called the opening and closing ceremonies. And just probably I've never seen a better opening and closing ceremony in the stadium. It was just bonkers, absolutely amazing. And you talked about hanging out around other commentators, because we were one of about 1,200 commentators in the arena, and you look up behind us, and the companies with all the money, like the NBCs of America and those sorts of things, they're the ones that with their big studios, opening studios behind us. We're jammed in, and I'm sitting there, Lavina's sitting there, and then the ABC from Australia is right next door. The radio were there as well. But that was a heap of fun, and you discover pretty quickly about the Olympics when you're on site how big a deal it is. You don't think, when you're sitting and watching the telly, oh, yes, Olympics. But when you're amongst it and you're talking to athletes, you discover really quickly how big a deal it is. It is enormous. Now, we probably take it with a grain of salt. Yeah, you trained 4 years and away you're going, oh, yeah, someone didn't win a gold. Why didn't they do that? Blah, 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 blah. But it really is something special. So, yeah, I've done a few studio Olympics since then, Rio, Tokyo, and the likes, and I love it. I think it's cool. So yeah, those are, and they're fun because you're always on the run, particularly if you're back in the studio and things are happening. Like we had Tokyo 2020 just gone, and we had a gold channel on Sky, and that was fun because you were just constantly having to be aware, and I had a great production team. So yeah, no, it's good fun. So the radio thing, Blake, it's easy. I love it. It's good fun.
Just a few quick fire stuff to finish off. So
Cool.
I asked Jeff Wilson this recently, so I'll ask you this. How do you think he's ended at the moment, so we can only talk about his debut game. How do you think the transition of Roger to Abasashik has gone to rugby so far, if you've been able to catch it at all?
He'll be fine. He'll be fine. I don't think there'll be any issue at all. For the transition for him, more about the nuances of rugby rather than just being flash and dash. So the things that he's not used to doing, getting caught in tackles and mauls and rolling, getting all that sort of stuff that they go on about and slow it down. And so, yeah, no, he'll be fine. He's a rock star.
Do you think he'll become one of the best, quote unquote, code hoppers that we've ever seen?
Yeah, I think he could be. He is freakishly talented, but we haven't seen enough. And you can't make a judgment after a couple of games. Give it a season, give it 2 seasons. Does he make the All Blacks? All those sorts of things. Does he make? If he's going to be talked about like that, got to make a difference. Got to be able to make a difference. Otherwise, just another code hopper.
Why do you think? Because you were in that era, so this is why I'm asking you the question. Why do you think Benji failed as opposed to Roger hopefully doing a lot better?
I think Benji was all about rugby league and always was. I think his change, not that I know this, I think his change just came out of frustration. And I think he was always going to be a rugby league player, and that's it. And I think he'll just close that chapter pretty quickly and put that under the bed, that rugby league transition. And he was probably at the wrong end of his career too. Maybe if he'd gone a lot earlier and he still had the great step, a bit like Roger, although Roger's still got a great step. Gosh, it's ridiculously good. Things might have been a little bit different. But I think Benji, in his heart, wasn't really a rugby player. Roger can be because he played rugby at Otahuhu College and he understands it. And he's probably, more of a student of that game rather than Benj was. So nothing against Benji, because I think still Benji had a huge influence on kids in this country when it came to rugby league. So that's probably why.
Just for a bit of fun, do you reckon it was a shame we never saw him at the Warriors?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was. I think you're right. I think it might have been different. But if you had him and Sean Johnson, two big hot steppers, left and right, can you imagine that? It would have been a step. It would have been a stepathon.
You can only dream. Now, yeah. So, do you think that was only because that was the first time out of twice he was told, "Oh, you're not required at the Tigers anymore." So he was like, "Crap, what am I going to do now?"
Yeah,
I know. I'll go and try rugby, and I'll get a big sponsorship deal with NIB.
Blake, you got to remember one thing. It's always about money. It's always about money. And in real world terms, he had to make a living. Sure, he's probably made a bloody great living, but it's always about money. A lot of the times they say, "Oh, I want to do this, want to do that." Yeah, because I'm really thinking, nah, someone's offered you a big wad of cash to come and do work for them. So yeah.
And finally, how do you think the Warriors are placed now? Now, because due to COVID-19, they've been stuck in Australia for quite a long time, and hopefully after today, as we're recording this, we get a favourable announcement where they're finally able to come home.
I don't think they're going to play any different if they were back here. Half of the team is Australian anyway. They don't even know New Zealand.
How do you think the new era of the Warriors is going, in your opinion? And you can be as polite as you like.
After, I don't have to be polite. I mean, I got friends on the coaching staff. They've got a really good pack. I'll be interested to see how they go in game 2 now that Sean's out. I thought Sean was solid in his debut back with the club, but we get Matt Lodge back in round 2, right? He comes back. Jesse Arthurs, they've figured out what I've said, and I'll say this again. Cody Nicarema's not a half; he's a 14, and I think he's even 18, so he's not even named to play this weekend. So I think I'm not overly confident. I basically watched the whole weekend of footy, looked at their game, and went, they're off the pace. You could say, are they off the pace because they only had one trial game? Maybe. But let's see what happens, because they're up against a Titan side in round 2 that looked really, really good. And so I'm going to put a question mark over it. There you go. I'm not going to commit. I'm going to do something I tell people not to do, sit on the fence. I'm going to give it time.
Right.
So let's, if you had the conversation after 6 rounds, then I think you'd have a better idea.
That young halfback just quickly at the Titans is phenomenal.
Oh, yeah. Well, there is talent everywhere. There is talent everywhere. So,
he just jumped on the scene and came out of nowhere at the end of last season.
Yeah, I'm looking
where we came from.
I'm looking forward to seeing how Ash Taylor goes this weekend. I think Ash Taylor should have started round 1, and I think he'll try and put a stamp on it in round 2.
Do you reckon because they're such good players that they'll find a way for Ash and Sean to play together?
Oh yeah, no, that's what. Well, so they're saying Sean's out for a month, which is a bugger, right? He's only just come back, and that was always going to be an issue. Was he going to be able to stay fit enough? So they're putting Chanel Harris-Tavita and Ash Taylor together. Ash Taylor, yeah, you got to remember he's played over 100-odd games, 160-odd games of NRL football. He knows how to play footy, and he was in an environment that wasn't conducive to him. So he's rebuilding his career. So you can bet your bottom dollar that he is going to come out and have a go and be able to run a team around. I don't think we've seen the best of him yet, and I'm pretty excited about this weekend.
And it's a crying shame that Chanel is being shopped off to the Super League, just saying.
Is he being shopped off? I haven't read anywhere he's being shopped off. Where did you read that?
I've seen it floating around.
Oh, you're playing my sources tell me?
No, I've seen it.
He's a young kid. Give him time. Yes, he's been in 2 or 3 years, but he's still a young boy. Give him time.
He might be like, if it is true, he might be like Mason England might turn out to be really good for them.
Wow. There's a lot worse things of playing in the north of England, having done the Four Nations up there. Great people, great environments, playing footy, getting good money to do what you love. Worst things in the world, right?
Well, yeah, I couldn't think of anything better being in the UK. I'd love to go to the UK one day. Anyway,
cool.
I'll get you to stay there, Stephen. But to the viewers, I'll say goodbye and thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And we will see you on the next episode.